The docking wing didn't collapse, it screamed its way out of existence, and that's the part nobody ever believes when I tell this story. Metal doesn't just fail quietly, it protests. The support column in wing delta was emitting this razor-thin shriek that drilled straight through bone, the kind of sound every species in the galaxy instinctively understands as a countdown. Not minutes. Seconds. Heat shimmered across the corridor, bright enough to ghost your vision, and the air tasted like burning circuits and regret. And then she ran through it. Not away. Through. Mara burst out of the smoke carrying 2 reptilian freight haulers tucked under her arms like oversized toolkits, sprinting across a floor that was actively dissolving into the reactor shaft below. The plating behind her peeled away in glowing sheets. She hit the threshold, rolled hard, and the wing folded in on itself with a thunderclap that rattled the entire station. For a heartbeat, nobody spoke. We just stared at the empty doorway where fire had been. But the truth is, to understand why a human would charge into a collapsing inferno instead of fleeing it, you have to rewind to the market that morning, before the alarms, before the fire, before the station learned what humans actually are. I was with Director Reth, head of station security, a veteran of 3 border conflicts and a creature I had never seen surprised by anything. He was surprised now. We were watching Mara weave through the crowd, and she was bleeding. A crate edge had sliced her forearm open, bright red drops pattering onto the polished deck. She didn't slow. Didn't even look. She was scrolling through a cargo manifest, muttering about missing shipments. Around her, hardened mercenaries, species that hunted for sport, stepped aside. Not out of politeness. Out of fear. Reth leaned close and whispered that it violated every survival instinct in the room. Injured beings signal weakness. They seek aid. They retreat. Mara was doing paperwork. To predators, that didn't read as toughness. It read as something broken in the best possible way. Later he confronted her outside her quarters, demanded to know why she hadn't reported to Med Bay. She slapped a patch on the wound, laughed, and said humans bleed all the time, it's just maintenance. She explained it like you'd explain weather. Reth's crest twitched in visible distress. He couldn't process a species that treated injury like an inconvenience instead of a crisis. Then the explosion hit. The shockwave knocked us sideways and the alarms began howling. By the time we reached Wing Delta, the blast doors were warped outward, smoke vomiting into the corridor. Toxic atmosphere. Structural failure imminent. Protocol said wait for heavy suits. Protocol said nobody goes in. Mara looked at her partner, a human tech named Rowan. No speeches. No hesitation. He jammed a pry tool into the seal. She rammed the door. I shouted that the air would liquefy their lungs. She glanced back, irritated, and yelled that the math favored action. Then they vanished into the fire. I was certain we'd just watched 2 suicides. 30 seconds later Rowan stumbled out, dragging a worker. Mara followed with another slung over her shoulder. She dumped them, wiped soot from her face, and turned around to go back in. Security grabbed for her. She shrugged them off. A shard of metal was buried in her leg and she was leaking blood into her boot, but she moved like it was nothing. The station AI escalated to catastrophic alerts. The main beam started singing that awful metallic hymn of collapse. Through drone feed we saw 5 workers pinned under wreckage. Rowan couldn't lift it. Mara shoved him aside, wedged herself under a slab glowing with heat, and screamed. Not a human scream. Something older. The metal shifted just enough. Rowan dragged the trapped workers free. The column snapped. The bay began to fall apart in sections. They ran. She was limping, still carrying the smallest survivor. The blast doors sealed a fraction of a second before decompression claimed us. Silence followed. Heavy. Disbelieving. Hours later in Med Bay we expected her unconscious. She was awake, eating ration paste and complaining about the flavor. Doctors couldn't keep her sedated. Her metabolism burned through drugs like kindling. Reth asked the question everyone wanted answered. Why risk death for strangers? She looked genuinely confused. Said it was simple arithmetic. Damage is temporary. Dead is permanent. Humans are difficult to kill, she added casually, like it was a brag and a joke at the same time. The official report called it adaptive altruism, evolutionary resilience, a dozen sterile terms that tried to cage what we'd witnessed. But walking through the market days later, watching the crowd part for her, I understood the truth. It wasn't that humans don't feel fear. It's that they refuse to let fear finish the equation. Pain is a cost. Death is negotiable. Survival is collaborative. They bleed openly and keep moving, and that breaks something primal in every species that evolved to hide weakness. The galaxy thought humans were fragile because they bruise and break. Now we know better. They are dangerous precisely because they accept the damage. They don't need to win cleanly. They just need to win last. And if this story shocked you, subscribe to the channel for more sci-fi stories that prove the universe is a lot stranger, and a lot more human, than we think.